Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's session. We are super excited to have you join us for another RISMedia webinar. Lots of fun things to talk about today. An amazing panel of guests to share insights and ideas and actionable takeaways with you. So thank you for investing in yourself. Thank you for taking the time to stay informed about the issues at hand here and making sure that you understand the depth and nuance and complexity of some things that are very important to our industry. Today's topic is called Real Estate's New World Order, what the future holds for our industry's associations. And so I'd like to take a moment just to introduce myself and our guests, and then we're going to get into a great conversation. I also want to encourage you to put any comments or thoughts in the chat and Q&A section. We certainly welcome them and do our very best to try and cover a variety of insights. My name is Matthew Ferrara. I am your host for today's conversation. I am an industry expert. I have been in real estate for more than 33 years, and my focus is on helping this industry continue to evolve and to thrive. I'm an author, speaker, and frequently have the opportunity to work with organizations across America and around the world. So my goal today is to help create a great conversation in which some really important ideas can be put in their proper space for you to be able to leverage them for whatever your growth needs are and your role as a leader in the industry. So thank you for being here. Let me talk to you about some of our guests here. I just want to quickly introduce everyone. First, one of our panelists today is the president and CEO of the Realty Alliance, Craig Cheatham. I've known him for many, many years, and he is one of the smartest guys in this business. Not only does he have great insight into what some of the largest and most effective organizations in this business are doing, such as the big brokers who drive so much of the growth in real estate, but he has also such a great perspective, having been in the industry for a long time, to provide us some history and context and background. So we're super excited to have Craig with us here today. Also with us is James Dwiggins, the CEO of Next Home. He is someone who has a lot of insight into some of the ways in which organizations are both leading and innovating in the future of their roles. And he also has some wonderful ideas and opinions on exactly where the industry has done some great work and also has some work to do. And one of the things I love about talking with James is that he's able to give us both the encouragement as well as a little tough love from time to time, which this industry really benefits from, because every time we face a challenge in this industry, we always seem to rise to it and do better than before. So I'm excited to have James with us here as well. And finally with us, the Chief Advocacy Officer for the National Association of Realtors, Shannon McGann, is with us. And she has not only a wealth of knowledge and history in this business, but she also understands some of the depth and the context in which many of the issues facing our associations and you as individuals really need to be placed. There's a lot more than just the headlines out there. There's certainly a lot more complexity to being effective in creating both the change that we need while also creating the context that is necessary to understand what's necessary and possible for our organization to, for our industry to evolve and our organizations to be on the forefront of that. So also excited that Shannon is here with us. So friends, we have a really full agenda of some sophisticated topics. One of the things I love about doing RISMedia webinars is that we choose meaty topics here. We choose really sophisticated issues, and I don't think anything is more important right now than thinking about the future landscape, if you will, of our associations and of the organizations that are able to shepherd growth and evolution and take control of our future. So I'm going to kick off with one of the more important topics that, again, a lot of times people don't really realize these might be a little bit less exciting than the latest shiny object projects out there, but are critical to our industry's health and vitality. And I want to talk about the three-way agreement. So, Shannon, let's start with the issue of the three-way agreement. And it would help for some of the people who are tuning in here today for you to just give us a quick overview of what it entails. What is this three-way agreement? Where did it come from and how does it work? And then let's discuss the implications and its impact on local and state associations, especially within the context of some turmoil around it these days.
Sure. Well, happy to kick that off, and thank you for the very kind introduction. And it's great to be with you all here from our nation's capital, overlooking the Capitol building on this gorgeous DC day. But I'd much rather be in front of my laptop right now, talking to you all. So, yes, a three-way agreement is essentially the three-legged stool that determines how everyone from around every zip code around the country are represented through the National Association of Realtors and their state and local associations. It is a feature, not a bug. It is designed to make sure that there's a process for state associations to join NAR, to be involved in enforcement of the code of ethics and board appointments, and all of our committees that are making determinations on policy and otherwise. And to do a shameless plug for our advocacy group, it is essential to how our advocacy operation is run, because the three-way agreement helps to provide that substantial value to realtors around the country by ensuring that any advocacy related issue, that we've got your back at the local government, the state government, and at the federal government, and that resources are able to go to state and local associations when they have battles coming up, or when they have something that they're trying to support, like zoning reform or otherwise, and that those resources are getting to where they need to be, when they need to be. So some of the kind of misconceptions about it are, oh, well, you know, there's join at this level or at this level. So there are different due structures, and for NAR, those national dues are $156 for members in 2024. Not quite half of it, but close of that goes to our advocacy efforts. And those funds are not all spent here in Washington, D.C. There's always these like reports going out once a quarter saying, look at all of these large trade associations and their big advocacy budget, and what are they advocating for in D.C. When you see those, that's money that is, the bulk of it, about 2/3 of it, is going right back to state and local associations on things like big successes that we've had this year, pushing back on statewide ballot initiatives that would have opened up the door to rent control, looking at zoning reform and transfer taxes and issues that are popping up in city and states around the country. So this has been the approach for more than 100 years. NAR structure with membership at that national, state, and local level helps to empower realtors and also the consumers that you serve in many ways. So that's the one realtor brand access to it. You don't have to join the national association or local association, but when you do join, that you're part of that realtor brand, that we are speaking with a unified voice on matters of public policy. One of the reasons why this process exists is because there have been times when you have a state who has one opinion and another state who has another, who goes to Congress and says this is what's working. So we make sure that we're working within our own policy committees and advocacy committees to figure out those differences and to know how we can speak with one voice. Because if you're not, tell you, your voice is a lot quieter. And I spent 20 years working in public policy on Capitol Hill and the Treasury Department. And if it's not one voice and many voices, it really diminishes the power of what you're standing for. It also, the three-way agreement enforces a unified code of ethics and standards that helps to build consumer trust in realtors. It creates a national framework for risk management, and it also provides a range of other benefits out there, like the professional development, education, networking, all of our amazing research activities from Dr. Lawrence Yoon and Dr. Jessica Lautz. So I think when folks are talking about it, sometimes they're seeing it as it's three distinct things, but it's not NAR saying, okay, now the state and local associations are doing this. It's really the local and state associations feeding up that important information and the value of that single voice, so that we all have that connectivity. And it really promotes our partnerships and just makes us the strongest voice for real estate in Washington, D.C. and beyond.
So in many ways, it's kind of a federated structure, if you will. It allows for what we would recognize these days as a network effect, right? The ability for a local voice to reverberate up and for larger organizations to be able to take all of these inputs and put them into actionable form, whether it's in policy and advocacy, whether it is in understanding the ways in which the consumer is changing, the market is changing, the industry is reacting. This to me, I love when you started, you said, this is a feature, not a bug. And yet, you know, there's a critic for everything out there these days. So I think it'll be important if we maybe just address maybe the misconceptions that cause critics to think that there's something wrong here, when in many ways, there's something right here.
Oh, exactly. And so just, you know, the few examples I used of those types of advocacy dollars that are out there, and just the ability to say, okay, we understand as a local association that we're trying to open up housing inventory and create more housing supply. How are we going to do this within our local association? The state and the national associations are doing this around the country. So one of the real benefits is finding those best practices, and the ability to share what's working well in Oregon may also be helping in Texas, and vice versa. And the NAR being able to provide that connectivity. One of the areas that we have been working on this past year, we're very excited about, is the Housing Supply Accelerator Playbook. I know that's quite a lengthy name, but if you search for it on our website, the Housing Supply Accelerator Playbook, we at NAR worked with the American Planning Association, the National League of Cities, our friends over at the Mortgage Bankers Association, and the National Association of Home Builders to develop a playbook on 40 time-tested practices that will help unlock inventory, help with new builds, help with things like ADUs and other inventory-related issues, that then we take to local governments and share that these are ways that they can make quick policy changes that will unleash more inventory and that will bring housing costs down. And so that's something where we're able to then put advocacy resources behind it when it's time for those, legislative or political changes that are happening. That without the three-way agreement, if you're an organization that doesn't have that connectivity and that ability to serve at all levels of governance, it makes it that much more difficult, slower process, and less effective.
Makes a lot of sense. Let me pull in our other two guests on this conversation. James, thoughts on the three-way agreement and its implications for state and local associations' effectiveness in the future, and ultimately for creating that one voice approach that's so critical to getting a lot of things done in a sophisticated marketplace like real estate?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm not shy about where I'm critical on things that our industry needs to fix, but this is not one of them, in my opinion. If you can't afford $156 in national dues, get another job. Like, go work somewhere else. Like, I don't know what to tell you, because it's, I've spent a lot of time with Shannon, and I've had an opportunity to educate myself on a lot of the advocacy work that goes on. This industry is naive to think that it will operate in any way, shape, or form in its current capacity without advocacy being done at local, state, and federal levels. That 1099 status that we all love and enjoy, I know my company benefits from it. Good luck if we didn't have the ability to push back on budgets that are trying to remove that. So, I think that there's a lot of anger out there. Part of this is because it's a tough market. Part of it's because people want someone to blame for things. Part of it is because, this is my other side of it, as an industry, we still haven't figured out how to articulate all of this value correctly at the local, state, and national level. We're still working on that. And that's something that we get to own as an industry. We can't just blame everybody else because they didn't know. They have to take some responsibility in figuring out what it is that their money goes towards. And we also have to think about how we get the message out. And if the way we're doing it's not working, then we can't keep doing the same thing. And I think that's an important part for our industry to look at. When I talk to a lot of associations, the first thing I tell them is you have to constantly be disrupting yourself. You can't just be comfortable with the way things are. You've got to constantly be looking at, is there a better way? This whole idea of it's not broken, so don't fix it. Get rid of that mentality. If people don't know what you do, then you're failing at your job of articulating that, and you have to try different approaches. Maybe that's having somebody you hire full-time whose job is they literally just go to brokerage office meetings full-time. That's all they do, is they're just out there in the field taking meetings, trying to explain what it is. For agents that, you know, the other side of that coin is they're busy. They're trying to just get deals done. They're meeting with clients, they're playing therapists. And so there's this disconnect between a majority of the industry, the ones that aren't involved in association work. Then there's the people that are volunteering their time, and then staffers doing a tremendous amount of work. And in between all of that is this noise. And right now, when people aren't making a lot of money, they're looking at every possible way to cut costs. And so they look at this going, well, I should just be able to pay for my local association, when they don't even realize that some of that federal money comes back down. Like, so it's just, there has to be this whole concept of reinventing every aspect of the way that we disperse information. You know, Shannon and her team's got this great podcast that they're doing. You know, they've obviously got that going. They're working on trying to get more communication down. But I don't think if every association, which I'm assuming mostly is listening to this webinar, is just going to continue to do things the way you've always done it, then you're going to have a hard time finding value in the future. You just are. And there's a lot of anger in the world right now. Look, like large companies like mine, we got sued, we had to settle, we weren't covered under the settlement. There's anger there, and that bridge and those olive branches have to get reconnected and understanding what each value is. And unless we start just having those rocking on the porch conversations, we're going to continue to have this divide. I personally think the three-way, it makes complete sense, but I'm also educated enough to understand how it works, because I've spent time talking to Shannon, who's more than willing to spend time with me to educate me on that process. And then it's also my duty as a CEO of a large company to educate my members about what this is and why. And I'm not shy about it. If you have a problem giving the National Association $156, even if you disagree with some of the stuff that they do, that is the cheapest form of insurance possible in Washington, D.C. to make sure that they're not screwing up our profession any more than they already do. The end. That's my take.
Right.
So.
Right. No, and you make a great point.
Oh, sorry, Matt. According to our advocacy
Shannon?
breakdown, it's 19 cents a day, James. 19 cents a day in advocacy. It's
right. And ironically, you know, ironically, a lot of the, you know, James makes a really important point here, which is a lot of the critique is coming from a point of misinformation. They just really don't understand what it does and how it benefits them. I'm pretty sure that there isn't a single member of the National Association of Realtors that doesn't spend more than 19 cents a day on coffee. And so if you have to cut down on your coffee to rank up on your advocacy and on your ability to have a voice at the table, I think this, you know, properly explained is not a big challenge. Craig, I know that your members understand the three-way agreement. Do you want to chime in here?
Sure, and obviously James alluded to our anger and rage, and we have some legitimate beefs with NAR at this point, and we're going to address those individually with NAR and not on this webinar. But I think we heard Shannon very eloquently articulate how those pieces fit together, and we're hopeful NAR will continue to articulate and re-articulate that to get that message across. I think those light bulbs coming on will be very important for us as an industry moving forward. Now, Shannon's going to like this part too. Large brokerage leaders certainly value advocacy as the premier benefit.
100%.
And but my very first role in this industry, I was supporting a state association of realtors. And there I very quickly figured out, no matter how many things we were doing for our members, if we did only one thing and did it well, it needed to be advocacy. And Shannon's alluded to the view out her window. The state Capitol dome filled my office window. So if I missed it on any other level, that should have been a clue to me. But it works because the associations that are most heavily involved in advocacy are better positioned than any other entity to do it and do it well. We were a state association. We had state license law and a state legislature, and that's how it pieced together. And I got to see it work at all levels. And I'd say realtor associations at all levels need to be evaluating their programs and services. I think James alluded to this. And consider scaling back to a shorter list of member benefits, ones that no other organization can do as effectively as they can, and no one can do as cost efficiently as they can. And this is a random tip for maybe very specific for each organization in the realtor three-way agreement, maybe to attend some non-realtor events to get a sense of the pulse of the industry. Something I observe is sometimes it's not quite an echo chamber perhaps, but it's a limited perspective, and just participating in real sanctioned events, you can miss out. I see James on panels around the country in the last 12 months, some very important conversations. And from time to time, I look around and say, I'm not sure anyone from the realtor organization is here to get this real sense of the industry. Nobody in the realtor organization has eyes and ears on these important conversations. So that would be an important takeaway. So yes, the three-way agreement, let's lean in to the strength of that, but let's also look outside of that and listen to the conversation and benefit from those perspectives going forward as well.
You know, Matthew, just to add to Craig's comment, sorry to interrupt here. I think about just, if I think about my day, it's constantly playing fireman. It's just dealing with one fire after the other. It's just unfortunately what the role is the, you know, when you have a big company. If I think about my brokers and agents, they're dealing with the same thing, just a different level of what that is. And to them, all of this stuff is out of sight, out of mind. And if I was, like, for example, running an association or was on strat for one of these associations, like I think Craig's onto something. It needs to be very personal and relevant and real time, meaning here is a bill, I'm making this up, but here is a bill that is being proposed locally, state, national, whatever. Here is what this might do to your profession and your livelihood, which gets them riled up, and go, here is what we are going to do to fix that. And this is exactly where your $156 went. I'm boiling this really basic, but giving that to them and then a reason for them to disperse that to their members. If I had that kind of very basic information, and everybody knows they love politics. We all like to follow it, and you know, Americans are Americans. But if there's a way for us to see all of this in that kind of capacity, then it's relevant real-time value to me. And I think what Craig said is so important. The overlap of where associations are, I think they need to focus more. Don't boil the whole ocean, just focus on some things that are really key. Most of my people don't go to associations for, you know, training. They get that from the company or somewhere else. I'm just giving some ideas here, but like I just need to think about an association as solving these three things, and I can't live without that. I have to have that, or my profession goes away, and I got to get it down to a point where an agent can read that and go, oh my God, I would hate that if that actually happened. That would, oh, it'd be horrible for my buyers and sellers. I got to get them riled up about it. And then that value just naturally comes. It's like, well, what can I do to get involved? Well, you don't have to. Just keep sending 156. And I think the more we focus in on that, I think that a lot of these issues will solve themselves, because in many ways, I think we're trying to do too much sometimes.
So I want to just bring Shannon in here for one last thought on this and then move forward with another question. But Shannon, there are some associations who do what James is suggesting and have either anticipated or already listened to Craig's wisdom in the past, which is they have really hyper-focused on their advocacy role. But there are a lot that haven't. There are a lot that are trying to be the Swiss Army knife of every possible need that members have. Do you think that there's an opportunity for, you know, like a model, a role modeling opportunity for those associations that are, I mean, this is a period for strategic planning, and I can't tell you how many state associations I've worked with where really the only objective that they wanted was to strengthen their advocacy, and the other elements were either on lather, rinse, and repeat, or were slowly, you know, being set aside. I think stressful times focus our efforts. But at the same time, they also said, and we want to be a role model, and we want other associations to be able to look at us and go, I want to do it that way too. Do you think there's something there, like there's maybe a formula that, or a playbook, if you will, if we use the playbook term, that we could replicate here?
Oh, absolutely. And that best practice is what we do on every issue every day. So when we do see something that pops up, it's politics, it's a game of whack-a-mole. You never know, all of a sudden, oh, you know, that this department decided to repeal this rule and we need to have these conversations, or this, there's no such thing as a local, state, or national issue. Everything is one committee markup amendment away from becoming a national issue. So we have to be prepared on all of that. And the way that we are is because we have such close relationships with the advocacy community at the state and local level. So we have flown in folks, the FPCs, the federal political coordinators, who are one of the best kept secrets in all of real estate, that every single member of Congress is someone who's back in their state, back in their district, who has that connection, bringing them in with their government affairs directors and others on issues to make sure that it's, even though it is a national issue, that we're hyper localizing it, that this is going to be the impact. And James, you mentioned 1099 independent contractor status is something that is always on the table. And I think members don't think about it often because we've been so successful in year after year after year ensuring that legislation doesn't pass that would potentially limit the 90% of our members who are independent contractors, who are small business people. It would potentially change their tax status and limit their ability to do that. And that happens at the state level over and over again too. So, and to your point about, you know, how do we best communicate? That's exactly right. That's why we started the Advocacy Scoop podcast. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, to boil this all down into 20 minutes once a month. Here's what's happening in advocacy that's relevant to you. The first 3 episodes, we launched it in May, are all Advocacy 101. Just here's what we do, here's what we don't do. Hint, we don't get involved in presidential elections. We get involved in every other one, and just where those member dues go, what are the types of issues that we're fighting for around the country. The most recent Scoop podcast was all about the wins that we had in November. And again, these are not all just, you know, what's happening in the House and Senate. That's what people focus on nationally, but these are, you know, what is happening in Delaware, what is happening. New Hampshire just became the final state. We now can say all states in the District of Columbia have participated in our issues mobilization program to help impact ballot initiatives. And so now we have 100% participation with our states and DC. So these are all things that we cover, and nar.realtor/advocacy wins covers decades of these issues. We have a 30-year fixed rate mortgage because of the work that NAR has been doing over the years. The ability to preserve 1031 like-kind exchange, that is always on the table. It is in every single budget. It is a huge pay for, and we've been successful in ensuring that Congress doesn't pass anything to change that, and we'll continue to do it. So as much as it is fun to and important to share where we have those wins, I think it's also important to share what happens if those wins don't happen, and it's pretty dreadful.
Right. I think it's a good point. I'm excited for your podcast because one thing I'd like to say we don't have in our associations in the future would be any best kept secrets. I'd like to make sure that it's all as transparent as possible, and I love that your podcast is going to help make that happen. One thing that also I think we just want to add to this equation, which is this is an industry that's always got new people entering into it. It's always turning. What we look like today is going to be so different in 6 months, 3 months, 3 weeks, because our best members are always recruiting new people, and not everybody has that history. I'm 33 years in this business, one of the old guys who can now say, I remember when, and as a result, that helps me. But there are a lot of opportunities where the old news is really old. Like no one actually, like you said, knew that 1031 exchanges or that 1099 issues keep coming up because they get in and their exposure to their association is extremely limited. So we always have that challenge, if you will. This isn't an association that's a fixed group of people that should know all of this by now. There's by default, they don't know any of this when they join. So Let me move forward. Let's go to another topic here, because I think this sort of sets the stage. These are some complicated issues, but they can have some really viable solutions. The next conversation I want to bring up here, and I want to ask James about this to start. One of the most critical things that is very front and center in the future of associations is membership levels. In advance of the NAR settlement in the middle of this year, it was one of the many key hot buttons alongside of, will there be challenges to the revenue in this business? Will buyer's agents still be viable? And then, of course, associations were thinking, oh gosh, if people are, if the way in which they work with consumers changes, will they leave the business? And there are some projections, significant projections, as to membership levels declining as a result of that. That obviously impacts both professionalism and budgets in this business. So what do you expect will happen with memberships going forward, and what are both the pros and the cons of membership levels fluctuating in the future?
Well, I mean, that if membership levels drop, it's less money coming in, which affects all of these things, unless the associations increase their dues to offset that, which I'm not opposed to. I'm not shy about the fact I think we're just in the beginning stage of loss of membership. I hope I'm wrong, to be clear, but I think that we're underestimating what that might look like. A lot of that's going to have to do with, our MLSs and associations going to be tied together. That's going to be an issue that we're going to go through. And then it goes back to the conversation we had about what is associations going to do to reinvent themselves and show value differently than what they have. I, again, believe associations have significant value, but that's for people that understand that. It's how do we get the other 90% that don't pay any attention, that don't come to association stuff, that don't involve themselves, that don't read the newsletters, which is a majority of our industry. I want to give you an idea or a couple of them that I think are relevant to this, though, Matthew, as well, because I want to just put some stuff out there to think about with this idea of what if membership goes away, or how do you offset that? A friend of mine here in the Bay Area, Trisha Thomas, I'm going to give her a shout out. I was involved in their strat planning, and I challenged the entire strat planning group to rethink what an association could look like. Not suggesting this is the answer, just trying to reinvent yourself. Is it just for realtor members? It's a question. Is it homeowners? Is it realtor members and homeowners so you can expand your base? Is it people who care about homeownership rights in America? Like, do we look at how we change the actual customer of an association to something different? One of the ideas that I posed. But what I want to give her credit for was a comment that I made. I think for those of you that know me, my wife is a reporter for CBS. And, during this whole mess the past 12 months, our industry got crushed with bad PR. And, we had very, very little representation in the industry to counter some of that stuff. And I'm not talking about just national, I'm talking about locally as well. We've all seen the headlines locally. So one of the things I love about what Trisha did is says we approved a new plan in August and we hired a new public affairs specialist in September. We already have a marketing and communications department that focuses on internal communications. We have a government affairs director who focuses on advocacy and housing and market intelligence. But this new person's job is just to work on public affairs, getting information out, working with the press, working with brokers, working with the membership, like really trying to get to be a front and center advocate on whenever there's a story related to housing, that this person is one of the main people that the press contact. Who knows how it's going to work. But I love the idea that they're trying to reinvent it so that when we see something on TV or social media, that in this particular example, the Based Association of Realtors has their public affairs person who's on the news covering these things as well. And I think it's a really interesting approach to both externally showing consumers what we do as an industry, but also internally showing where those dollars are going. Because when you see somebody defending the industry or homeowners on television, it starts to shift that opinion of it. So I think that was a really clever way to start rethinking that. Again, I don't know how many associations do this. I'm not involved in every local association, but I love the idea that they're rethinking where they're gonna do stuff. the last thing I made a short comment on this, but I do think there needs to be someone, and Nikia, giving her credit, she did this in her speech. She's talking about how she's going to be extending an olive branch to the large brokerages, which I think is a smart move on NAR's part. But what about having somebody whose entire job is they just go around to all the real estate offices, get in front of them, like every real estate company has a monthly office meeting where we have a mortgage person come in and talk about rates, even though we can all see them online. Why not have somebody in there from the association talking about the advocacy issues and the things that are happening there, that their job is just 5 days a week. You're going morning and afternoon to every real estate office because they're not reading the emails. Unfortunately, I mean, I have a podcast, everybody knows that. Shannon knows this. Not everybody listens to podcasts, they don't have the time. So like we have to think about all these different ways to communicate. Short form content, social media, join podcasts, public affairs specialists, get on stage at every event humanly possible so you've got just attendance there. I think if you start doing that, then this attrition that we're talking about, even NAR's forecasting some attrition, is probably mostly just market dependency, but you're going to start to change the opinion of what the association does, and then people stop questioning where their dues dollars go. I believe associations can reinvent themselves, but they have to look at, to Craig, I'm going to go back to Craig. If there's a department or a job that isn't producing results, then transition it, move it somewhere else. If people aren't finding value in a specific part of the association, cut it, move that money somewhere else, try something different so that you're not just, we're trying to find a solution to this problem. Or I'll be the other side of this conversation, associations can have a real hard time having membership because the current issue is they don't know what they do and they don't value it. A large portion of them don't. That has to get fixed as soon as possible, or the domino effect is Shannon doesn't have the budgets and then it affects everything all the way down the line. So,
you know, it's funny, James, as you were speaking, because I took some notes. Some of these things, again, not they're sophisticated issues, but not complicated to solve. Having a public affairs director, trying different ways to get the word out. I actually wrote down on my notes here as you were speaking, I wonder if a significant dues increase would increase people's attention to what the association does. You know, if they were paying a lot more, they might be a lot more engaged, and it actually could be another mechanism, if you will.
Maddie, one final comment is going to sound completely insane what I'm going to say. Look, everybody gets bombarded with emails and social media is a shit show and everything else. Like, also, maybe there's a quarterly mail newsletter that comes out. Like, I'm going to go nuts here and be like, it's just from local or state or national, and it's just, here are the 7 bills that we just squashed. I'm making this up, but like, it's addressed to the individual, it's snail mail. Hell, you could even use a pigeon carrier for all I care, but whatever works to get it out there. Like, we have to be thinking, all aspects.
You know, James, it reminds me of my HOA newsletter, right? I mostly forget about my HOA unless something really crazy is going on, like my neighbor paints his house bright pink. And then suddenly I'm reading all the past HOA newsletters and wondering why I didn't check my email and why I didn't go to the meetings and why I didn't look at the policy change that put pink on the potential paint colors. I totally hear you, and human nature is a little odd like that. Craig, jump in here for a second, because I know that you know, membership challenges certainly don't happen unless the big brokers experience membership challenges as well. What's the interplay here?
Well, I was going to say, James made me smile because just picture me 30 years ago. I was that person hitting the highways and the byways and speaking at the Western Sizzlin at the Pike County Board of Realtors meeting and reminding them of all that their state and national association were doing for them. I think it has to be that way. I certainly laugh at that I was the out-of-town guest speaker, visions of Van down by the river, I guess. But for the last couple of years, at least, I have been asked to predict, going back to the larger question, how much NAR membership would drop. And those asking are always surprised with how small I've predicted those numbers would change. Obviously, I'm very proud to report I've been within 1% every time, but just thinking about their disconnect as I try to help explain it to them, I think the disconnect has been people have expected that members are going to make some kind of principled decision on membership based on their disappointment with a handful of volunteer leaders or a handful of top-level staff. But there are two realities that they ignore. First, the vast majority of NAR members are stuck. And I know that's a provocative word, but they cannot get access to MLS without being a realtor. And just as importantly, it really is market forces are what really affect realtor membership. And I've watched this being CEO of the International Federation of all the state licensing agencies. We watched license numbers very, very closely. It was part of our revenue. It's all about market opportunities. So I don't expect membership numbers really to change despite all the talking heads saying otherwise, unless we get several more courts maybe to decouple MLS participation from realtor membership, or if we continue to wallow in our current market where the Fed's version of inflation and what they need to do is, I think, different than what it should be. So I don't think that's going to be a huge conversation for us, at least in 2025.
Cool. And Shannon, last word on this topic. You want to get in on where we think association, either membership and, or if you will, sort of like some of the inventiveness that associations may need to tap into in order to maybe stem the tide, if there is a tide of decline, or how about turn it around, increase it? Realtors are really good at this. I know some associations, for example, who have stakeholder members now who don't have, they're not doing anything related to real estate. They've brought in the auto and the Chamber of Commerce and the technology, and like they've really said, like, who shouldn't be a member of our association and why not? And quite frankly, especially for the cost of dues, for a lot of other organizations, this is a blip on their budget for access to the market of real estate professionals. So just some thoughts there you might want to touch on.
Sure. So whenever this topic comes up, I always think back to, I just celebrated my 6-year anniversary, NAR-iversary, last month. And so 6 years ago, when I was interviewing for this position and before I started, I think I was going around telling folks, oh yeah, there were 1.2 million members. Maybe I think we were getting up to 1.3 around that point. So we were saying over 1.2. And then over the years, with this incredibly sharp increase, where were all of those conversations about that? Like, what are these very large numbers? We just finished at the end of October on track to end 2024 with the 4th highest membership numbers on record. And so if there are declines next year, I agree with Craig, a lot of these are just industry based, just market based, just we know that there are not enough homes on the market right now for sale. And so that is something that we're consistently working on, is inventory and just getting more houses moving for those first-time home buyers who are just very eager to get into a home. So those are the concerns we have from an advocacy perspective, is opening up the marketplace, and with the marketplace, members have more access to opportunity as well. But also in advocacy, the budget issues are interesting because it's very scalable. As I mentioned before, you join, it's $156, roughly 70 of that goes into advocacy, and then we roughly 2/3 of that is going back to state and local associations through realtor party programming grants. And so a lot of that is how we're able to tap into it, and we can do larger campaigns because we have more funds. But that doesn't mean we're not going to be in a fight if those funds alter, or if there are different budget changes, that we can still do that. The numbers matter, but what's most important to us is that we can be a voice for all of those members, and that is that they have the ability to go out there and help those consumers get into homes. So whether or not this shifts, we again have gone through several 100,000 have joined, and I think, to James, your point, that's another reason to just have reinvigorated communications efforts, because folks who may have joined during the pandemic, back then we were doing a lot more direct communications because there was breaking news happening. I think the largest open we ever had was real estate declared an essential service by the federal government, and we had to go state by state, and in some cases county by county, to make sure that was happening, and we were completely successful there, making sure that independent contractors that our members had access to PPP loans and unemployment insurance, and just delivering the breaking news that this was actually happening in federal legislation and moving through. And so those open rates were huge, but so I think folks really pay attention when there's very serious consequences that are out on the line. But when things are happening that are being solved before they hear about it. Those are my favorite ways to solve it. I would much rather folks not have to do a call for action and not have to engage if they don't need to, because I want them focused on their day jobs. But we still know that we have those dedicated members who are advocacy driven, who will be there to pick up the phone and make those calls when we need it.
But that's exactly what we got to fix is that. So 2 comments with that, Shannon. Number 1 is 90% of the industry forgot that the reason they were able to sell houses during COVID was because of the work that you did. We're really good at forgetting about everything that happened last week. And so we have to constantly reinforce even the historical perspectives of what has occurred, because people go, oh shit, I forgot about that. Like, wow, that was important. And the fact that you are doing all that incredible work, that's the biggest problem, is that they don't know you're doing all of that. And that's the part I think. I'm not criticizing, by the way. My point is that's what we have to figure out, is that they understand that there's a lot, these things aren't becoming a big issue because they were already gotten rid of before it became a big issue. And so, you know, again, we're really good at making assumptions as a society when we don't, you know, out of sight, out of mind. We just think nothing's happening. It's pretty much common human nature. So we have to figure out as an industry how to make sure they understand all of that stuff at all times, so that they're constantly being reinforced on what that money is. Because I think most people, I'll bet you that if you did a survey today and asked people who were here in 2020 if they remember that NER was the reason why they were able to get PPP loans, I'll bet you 90% of them forgot, or maybe more.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to figure out how we solve, is getting somebody out there to constantly reiterating. And then, you know, Matthew, your comment, I'll bet you what, 40% of the industry today wasn't here in 2020, something like
That's
that.
right. That's right.
So all of those people have no idea what NER did back in 2020, and we got to fix that too. So,
you know, James, that's a good place to wrap this question, which is, it occurs to me that like this is a problem of the feature of our industry. There's always going to be new people who need to be educated. There's also going to be people who need to be reminded. You know, when the market is busy, we forget all of our problems, let alone most of our past, because we're so busy. And then you said something earlier, which is when the market is slow, people are looking for a boogeyman. They're looking for a reason. They're looking for just a reason to complain. And that's unfortunate. It's maybe just human nature, but it would be wonderful and actually perhaps quite curative for us and for everybody. I just think about everybody who's watching us right now. Everybody who's watching us right now knows someone in their organization right now, in their office, who should also be watching us but aren't, right? Like, so how do we activate that? How do we activate people saying afterwards, you know, going into the lunchroom after this webinar, going, how come you weren't on the RISMedia webinar? How come you didn't watch that? How are you not being engaged in what is literally one of the many important bricks in the foundation of your business? So, you know, I totally sympathize, and I love this conversation because it's at the same time it's pointed out difficulties, it's also pointed out opportunities for all of us here. I will just say one interesting thing. I personally, I'm a bit contrarian on all of this, which is I actually think there's an opportunity for the industry to grow through these changes, because as it communicates more, it's going to attract more people. Just as we did such a good job teaching our members to defend their value over the last year, they've actually done better with consumers, engaging with consumers, and retained their buyer business. The more we communicate to members, the more we'll actually attract additional members. I actually think it could be a surprise for us to look back 3 years from now and say, well, not immediately, but look, we've eventually increased our numbers, and the people who are in are more committed, more dedicated, and more capable of doing this. So I don't know, just another possibility for associations to thrive in the future. Let me go to our last question here, and I want to go to Craig on this. You know, we've talked about a variety of areas of potential understanding, potential misunderstanding, and growth. But let's talk about a very important perspective in this business, which is the perspective of the biggest brokers in our industry and their relationships with the local, state, and national association. As associations do evolve, as they, you know, take maybe some of this panel's advice and lots of other advice. How would you advise them to, stay focused on the needs of the big brokers, their biggest stakeholders, and the needs that matter the most, really, if you will?
Well, Matt, I've been encouraged by a change in our language recently. It was several months ago, I began focusing my input to industry organizations around the word partner, calling on boards, associations, MLSs to reorient their thinking around their largest brokerage stakeholders, thinking of them as partners, not so much members. And so it wasn't just semantics that I was getting at, but a change in the relationship that brings about tangible changes in how we work together. And I'm pleased to report in the last several weeks, I have begun reading articles, hearing panelists and speakers encourage that same shift together as partners. So I'm feeling, okay, mission accomplished. So being partners, it reorients how we work together, how we focus our work on business solutions for brokerages and the industry. And moving forward with this type of work, I believe is a win-win for boards, association networks of all kinds. So I want to take the opportunity and see if this one works, to add another word to that now. And I would like it to be associations going forward to think of top brokerages as resources. I would say the challenges that are ahead of us are going to require all the best minds, all the best ideas at the table, and large firms have the bandwidth in terms of numbers of people, in their experience, in their expertise, and they have the luxury of being able to scan the horizon and help shape the future, not just keep their heads down to keep the business going, which a lot of our mom and pops really have to focus on that. So they are the ultimate users group. If boards, association networks will just use them as that resource. So I see them as being purposefully excluded sometimes when we have this great opportunity to not treat them like a nuisance or an obligation, but in fact as a tremendous resource. That is that I'd like to see. So the move toward resources and the move toward partnerships. And a lot of us, like you, Matt, who've been here since the early days, remember when associations were about bringing order and standards and ethics, and that was before many states and territories and provinces even had their own license laws. So working together with competitors was necessary, and it was self-evident as a need. And since then, we've had a pandemic, followed by a dramatic spike in the market, followed by just as dramatic a downturn, and then the settlement and bringing about a reset in the mindset of many people, not just in real estate, but across our society, people questioning everything, making an evaluation of every investment they make, looking for a return, examining the value proposition of the organizations they're joining. And frankly, what was once a safe harbor, building policy as an association and following its guidance, has become more of an expensive liability in the minds of some. So especially large brokerage operations leaders these days are asking questions I have not heard them ask in my 33 years in this industry. They're reevaluating industry organizations of all kinds and talking out loud about perhaps being part of setting things up a little differently going forward. I know that sounds like a threat, but I believe it is a great opportunity, and it's probably the reason RISMedia pulled this panel discussion together, among others.
You know, Craig, I kind of like where you're going there. When you think about the fact that it's not just semantics, I often speak with associations who use terms like, well, how do we manage our membership? And that's really an odd way to look at members in a way, like we have to somehow manage them as opposed to how do we engage our partners. You know, one of the interesting points you made, and I think it gets underemphasized, is that the big brokers have massive network effects. If we engage a big broker, they have 50, 70, 100, 200, 300 office managers who can repeat the message and make Shannon's job easier by taking the message into the field. They have 1,000, 2,000, 50,000 agents who are opening their emails every morning and can amplify the messages out there. So it's like creating a network effect by partnering with the resources that the members represent, as opposed to managing them as if they are, like just trying to keep them in the ring, if you will, trying to keep them from causing any problems. Instead, why not release their abilities, their resources, and their emphasis? Do you see, though, Craig? Let me just ask this, and then I'll open it up to the panel here. Do you see any? Like you said a little earlier, like emphasis on advocacy was one area in which it was really important. Do you see other areas that are going underserved in terms of what big brokers would like to see more of in this partnership approach, as opposed to less of? Is there something that associations, they're kind of missing something really obvious that big brokers would say, yes, please, more of that?
Well, I think I could give several. Shannon was in the room recently when we talked about the research component. I know she listed it as one of her real benefits there. We're not excited to see in our media a quote from an internet portal about the state of our industry and the marketplace, or maybe even a national firm that has 1% market share going forward. We think the National Association of Realtors is the best source for this information, and so we've been talking with them about specific ways that our brokerages can help disseminate that information and let NAR be that source. We think there are lots of ways, and that's just on a national scale, but there are programs where NAR, like I said before, it does something better and more cost efficiently, more effectively than any other organization. NAR is the natural source for that. And I think there are examples I could list. Each state would be different, but at the state level, where Maine or Wyoming could find things that the Wyoming Association of Realtors could do. We're doing a lot of things they can't do, but there's things that they can do that we can't do. And certainly on the local level, when I talk about being a partner, I'm really focused on, there's some real business opportunities in terms of familiarity with the marketplace and engagement with civic leaders and city planners, and lean into all those things that only a local board of realtors could do, or something only an MLS could do, and do it so well. Stop the overlap. I would be remiss if I didn't say, please stop competing with brokers. Stop doing the things that brokers could do more cost effectively. We're paying dues for you to do that for our competitors. At least make them optional and charge them for it if you're going to do those kinds of things. But I think research is a way that, just a specific example of how we're talking with NAR about, we can do better on this, and we're going to help you do that.
Cool. Excellent. Well, we've got a couple of minutes left here, and see if James or Shannon want to tie into this particular question before we wrap up.
Sure, happy to jump in quickly, but I agree with Craig, and I also just want to highlight that our not new CEO, but now permanent new CEO, Nakia Wright, has been an absolute leader in this area and ensuring that, we don't work with politics, we don't work with policy, we don't work with portals, we work with people. And how do we value those personal relationships and make sure that brokerages around the country of all sizes and our associations of all sizes have the ability to hear directly from their representatives at each level of the association on what that value is, and more importantly, to listen to where there are those gaps that need to be filled. And so just over the last several months, having the opportunity to work directly with Nakia, who has been a fantastic advocate for advocacy as well, and to see that insight and the leadership she's showing there. And I think we're going to see a lot more going into the new year with strengthened communications between brokerages, associations, and NAR.
And James, I'll give you the last word.
I mean, I agree with my colleagues on all of that. I would say that one of the things that associations need to think about is the bureaucracy. I'm just going to call it out. You know, there's too much of it. We're scared to talk about issues when they're already out in the public. Like, let's not have that. Let's actually talk about those things. I think there's too many chefs in the kitchen in some capacity. I'm not an expert on association structure, but just looking at it, you can look at it and go, there's probably ways to shave some costs and make this a little more efficient than what it is. And I also want to give Nakia a shout out. I've got to spend some time with her, quite a bit of time with her. And I would say this, because I'm sure most of these are associations listening, you know, we have to get, I really believe this public affairs idea is a good one. I think that there's something there for us to be thinking about. How we are more transparent about things, I think, is a good thing for people to hear. Transparency is always positive. It may bring out conversations we don't want to have, but at least you're being proactive about it. And the more stupid hit pieces from, you know, news media that are coming out with old stuff that people are aware of, the more we get ahead of this stuff, it's going to be more of a conversation. I would say we have to give Nakia and Kevin time to do what they're already doing, which is fix probably some things that weren't done correctly in the association under previous leadership. I think that's pretty much a given. But I am confident that there is movement in the right direction. Even Craig's comments about working with the big brokers, you know, Nakia was very clear about the fact that they're working on a way to have much deeper conversations with the big broker base and the franchisors, of which I'm one of them. So I want to give everybody a little bit of time, because this change doesn't happen overnight, but certainly I think there is change coming. And the more that everyone can reinvent themselves and just constantly be looking at it, is this working? Is this not? If it's not, get rid of it. Let's move that money somewhere else, is a smart move to do today. So.
Craig?
Matt, I know he had the last word. I want to echo what he said. For those association leaders, there is an expectation that reform is coming from the actual practitioners, people out there in the market who are significant players in the industry. The headlines, the marketplace, the lawsuits, everything has come together, and they are expecting that you will utilize this time to reflect and reevaluate. So don't miss this opportunity. We need it as an industry, you need it as an organization, but just wanted to say there is an expectation that you are reevaluating and that you will come forward with a new plan for the future, and we're looking forward to participating with you in.
Agreed.
Well, that is a great word to end and wrap up our discussion on what the future holds for real estate association. So I want to thank Craig Cheatham, CEO of the Realty Alliance, James Dwiggins, CEO of Next Home, and Chief Advocacy Officer for the National Association of Realtors, Shannon. Again, thank you for sharing your thoughts, your insights, and your enthusiasm for our industry with all of our guests. The comments have been really terrific, and I'm sure they appreciate it. And you'll probably be getting some people reaching out to say more. And I want to, again, remind you, you've been watching another one of the wonderful webinars that RISMedia puts on a regular basis. I hope you enjoyed today's program. I hope you tell someone that maybe wasn't watching it with you that they absolutely should watch this recording. And we look forward to seeing you on future RISMedia webinars. On behalf of our guests and RISMedia, my name is Matthew Ferrara. Thank you so much, and I'm wishing you well until the next time.